Okay, I'm Eintou Pearl Springer. I come from Santa Cruz, Muesoti Santa Cruz, as we say in Creole. Um, beautiful, most beautiful place in the world for me. My background is First Peoples, African. My people, my grandfather, my mother's side, Tisha Guerra, came from Venezuela, was one of those peons who came to plant cocoa. And my paternal grandfather, he came from St. Vincent. He was born around the time of emancipation on a village called Mespo in St. Vincent. I have been to that place. He was very instrumental in who I am and what I am. I remember 3, 4, him putting me to sit on his lap in the little house in Santa Cruz. And he died at 106, so he was very, very old and black and short. And he had a heavy, heavy voice that came almost from the soles of his feet. And I can see him now with his thick leather belt on his waist and his flannel vest and his puya in the sheath by the side. And he would sing to me an old plantation song, which I feel jumbled me into being who I was. None to wipe my eyes, none to dry my tears, I alone in sorrow. I must go, I alone in sorrow. I must go. And although we moved from Santa Cruz by the time I was 5, that chant, that love way, has lived with me. And I think that, as I always say, that jumbled me into finding the songs, the stories of my people, and making them live and celebrating people like Papa, my grandfather, on whose backs we climb, the ancestors on whose backs we climb, and for whom we do everything to celebrate their struggles against enslavement, you know. And I've written about him. A mask from long ago creeps onto the face of now. O lover of memories, bring me the boli, the very one that my grandfather used to spear. But anyway, we're not talking about all of that today. I was in London for a while in '69, and I came back in around November '69, I think, and place was hot. I remember first day going into Port of Spain, meeting Lloyd Best, selling tapia at the bottom of Frederick Street. And I got involved with tapia at the time. And as the conflagration raged, I was involved with tapia. But I was also part of all the marches, all the protests, everything, until at that time I worked at the library, and there was one young man who was very involved, that the library was at Queen's Park East, and his name has gone out of my head now, but he was very involved, and at the time of the state of emergency. I remember him being hunted and all of that. I remember during the state of emergency being in a particular place in an apartment on Duke Street, and the police come in for us, come in with the ambulance, so intent on were they on shooting and killing. And then I was moved to the medical library where Lijiasu Umawale worked with me as a library assistant. And through him, I became a member of the North Arm of the movement, and made my mark, I believe, through my belief in the transformative power of culture. I was involved in things like the production of liberation, selling the liberation, doing the proselytizing, walking up and down through the hills of Laventille, and so on. Being trained by Macandal Daga in public speaking and so on, working in the communities, and eventually becoming part of the leadership of the movement later on in the 70s. And I was critically involved in the cultural arm. I remember doing a production, having these big arguments with the leadership at the time. Being firm in my belief that art and culture had a critical role in transforming people's view of themselves, and to activate that revolutionary fervor in people. And it was only until a night before Christmas Eve when I staged a production on what is now the Brian Lara Promenade. And I remember using Eric Roach's poem on Uriah Butler, our labor leader of the 30s, our revolutionary labor leader, who staged the strike and revolt in 1937. And we portrayed the burning of Charlie King, the policeman who was killed in 1937. And the police came to my mother's house the following night, Christmas Eve, and rampaged through it, about 12 of them in their filthy boots. And the thing caused quite a stir. It was written up in Tapir and all of that. And the movement took up and sat up and took notice and asked me to prepare a brief for how culture could be integrated into the revolutionary struggle, and I did that. And out of that, we established the Black Traditions in Arts, which was one of the signal things of the 70s, where our great calypsonians, our musicians, our poets came together, our dancers, people like Andre Tanka, Asta Johnson, Valentino, Stalin, Lasana Kwesi, the poet Chatswayo, Malik, Superior, Relator, all these people. And my own theatre company, Caribbean Theatre Guild, was very supportive of the effort. People like Dominic Kalipasad, Patrick Cambridge, Noel Blandin. I had an intrinsic sense of self-worth from where I grew up. The ideology came afterwards. One of the catalytic moments was in secondary school, where I was lucky to be taught by Gloria Valère the daughter of our great Larry Constantine, one of our greatest cricketers ever. And he had written a book called Calabar. And Calabar wrote about his own fight against a racist hotel in England when he went to play cricket. And him, having taken the hotel to court for racism and winning was my first exposure to understanding what racism was and the Ku Klux Klan and all of that. So it was an aha moment for me. Oh, so this is what this is about. So, and I was in, I think, sixth form at the time. And that put everything into perspective for me. When I left school and started to work, I entered into maybe the most class-ridden profession in the world, which is librarianship. And, I remember the first day walking into the library, one of the librarians said, "This one looked like she landed from Tobago," which was, of course, meant that I had my hair natural. I didn't have any fancy clothes or anything. And I remember that, and when we talk in the staff room, and I said, well, my mother worked as a domestic and so on. Somebody pulled me aside and said, "Don't admit to that." I said, "Why not? Every corner in her hand is for me." So 70 was just a accumulation of all that. I went to England I remember around Queen's Park East at the time, a lot of expatriates and white Trinidadians will come. So they didn't like to put me at the desk to work. I remember having an interview with the librarian at the university. And I didn't get the job because it was said I didn't have desk presence, which simply meant I was too black and my hair was natural. So when I went to England in 1969, a school friend of mine, a woman, Althea Jones, Dr. Althea Jones LeCointe, was very much in the leadership of the London Black Panthers. And I joined. I was in all the marches and demonstrations around the prisons. The pigs, we're pigs, we got to get rid of the pigs. And when I came back, I just walked straight into the movement. That was it. One of my most powerful memories is of the impact of theater. Okay, so we are in the Belmont Community Center, and I've written the script. And one of our members had recently been killed by the police. So I got so I'm just taking members of the movement and creating theater. So I got the brother's wife to play the role of the wife. And I got a very stoic, blank, I don't know how to describe him, one of the ordinary soldiers of the movement, to play the police chief who was killing off our youth, Randolph Burroughs. And I wrote the script and put Randolph Burroughs on trial. Now the place is packed with people. In those days, wherever we had anything, it was thousands of people. And the wife, I gave her the lines, but it's a natural emotion because it's her husband who was killed. And she gives evidence. And when the actor who's playing the police chief gives evidence, as he said, "As a policeman, it is my duty." And as he said that, the crowd just started to surge forward. If he had fallen, he would have been lynched. I had to run on stage. And it was one of the most enduring experiences of my entire life, because I have lived that experience over and over as I have tried to use theater to transform people's life. And I know in my heart from that experience what I believe deeply, that theater is a tool for transformation. And so my life's work has been that, using theater, using dramatic poetry, and so to transform the lives of our young people, to give them recognition, visibility, information. I've just published a collection of 13 plays called Survivor, which explores this, and all these plays have been performed. I mean, you know of the Camboulet, which is a ritual enactment of 1881, in which our African ancestors took on the might of the British constabulary and beat them for the right to have their remembrance of enslavement and their own emancipation, and to put paid to the enforced amnesia about our history that the colonial government was about. And this is in the streets, 4 in the morning. At 6 in the morning on Emancipation Day, I do another ritual of remembrance called Freedom Morning Come, which explores the lives of enslaved people and them coming together on Emancipation morning. It's done at the place where the Emancipation Proclamation was read. And at that time, there were revolts in Trinidad for 1 week. And the people, when the Emancipation Proclamation was read, they proposed a period of indentureship for 6 years. The people protested, pas de 6 ans in the Creole, no 6 years. For a week. And in the history, this is 1st of August, 1834. There was no cutlass, there was no bois, there was nothing. It is the first example that historians have found of peaceful protest. Peaceful protest. People refused to go back to the plantations. They settled all in Belmont and around Laventille. And so, it's historical facts. And because of the persistent revolt, they could not carry through the period of indentureship to 6 years. It had to be reduced to 4. So by 1838, there was full emancipation. I use stories a lot, Nancy stories. I have a story called How Nancy Brought the Drum. So that I think a critical facet of revolution, of liberation, of reparation is rewriting our history from our perspective. And a lot of my work is geared towards that. All of my work is geared towards that. So that I have taken a Nancy from the fawning, servile, dishonest creature of turning from a thief into a strategist. A lot is not known about 70. People know that there were cataclysmic results, shifts in the consciousness of people and in the economics. For instance, no black people worked in the banks before 70. And the first time I was called beautiful was in 70. You know, the first time African people's clothes were not regarded as costumes, and natural hair and skin had its own beauty. Although it was part of my upbringing and so on, it was never part of, regarded as the thing to be or have. So all of that changed, all of that perception changed. And we created a generation of strong people, strong leaders. I've had no youth. I gave it up to causes, to commitment. The embryo force ripened, catalyzed by recognition of poverty, insecurities, moved in desperation to shift the balance of power. My father, backbent, life spent between the citrus and cocoa of Stallmeyer, swallowing his pride, was forced to abide every humility to feed his family. He found an early death. His lungs collapsed from the consumptive fluid. His father mourned him. His children, hardly knowing him, watched stonily as the earth received him thankfully from a short, brutish existence. The hymns intoned in the cemetery, Rock of Ages, cleft for me, steal away to Jesus, be thou my guardian and my guide, were oddly at variance in their cadence from the white, immobile statues in the nearby church. In the twilight we had buried him, the mother sang, hardly sparing the time to grieve, focused solely on her children's needs. In time we smashed those statues or painted them black, black like we in vengeance wreaked on a God with seeming bias against our color, maybe because he came from the same culture as our oppressors. Black power urging we like Bookman to give allegiance to a God of vengeance, possessed of one cheek that will not turn, that will not turn. And Simone told us we were young, gifted and black, and we went eagerly back to Butler and Garvey. Hungrily we drank the words of Malcolm X and Cleaver, of Cambon and Macandal, Geddes Granger. How proud we were of Stokely, child of the very hills from which we were carrying the flag still, and we knew no fear. Even when the Mahasabha tried to stop us linking with our Indian brother, we marched into Caroni and the people welcomed us gladly, and we knew no fear. We marched everywhere, raising Ogun's red, marching, even to bury our dead. Yes, they came for us, they're disillusioned young, in the marching time, in the revolution time, in the curfew time. We fought their guns with sticks and stones and made some of our own in the marching time, in the revolution time, when fists mocked the sky and we cried enough of scrambling for pennies in the dust. They came for us, meaning to kill us. The sirens screamed. Our young blood was spilt across the land, and in our righteous cause, we knew no fear. In the curfew time, the overburdened cells groaned beneath our weight. We knew no fear. Even when Hudson Phillips passed straight laws lifted straight from apartheid South Africa. With Asher and Olabisi, we tried to build institutions for the black family. And the poets and musicians, craftsmen, dancers, actors and calypsonians worked hard to build a better nation that would give respect to the African. Building black traditions, making links across the islands and the African diaspora, teaching the truth of Africa and pride in our roots that go deep within her. Years of working, years of toiling, teaching, talking, walking in those hills of love until I've had no youth. That's it.